Okay, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our next speaker. I had the privilege of working with Mark Snow DTM as pathway guide for undistricted clubs all over the world that do not belong to a district, and they all needed pathway guides. So um, I had the privilege of working with Mark and also the privilege to meet him in Chicago. Mark is he will tell you his journey in pathways. He's as passionate about pathways as I, or maybe even more. So, Mark, floor is yours. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Fabiola. Toastmasters, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world tuning in. It's good to be here, and I'm very, very honored to be invited to be able to share my story on my journey to becoming the world's first Pathways DTM. I guess the first premise of that whole discussion is that the purpose of becoming a distinguished Toastmaster isn't just to get the letters after your name. It's not just to get the award and the plaque, which, for example, doesn't actually change from the traditional to the Pathways program. The Distinguished Toastmaster plaque is still the same plaque. But for me, this journey towards becoming a Pathways DTM was all about discovery. It was all about learning about this crazy new thing called Pathways and trying to find out just what it meant for my members back in District 69 in Australia. So by way of introduction, I come from District 69, which is the northeast of Australia and Papua New Guinea, so pretty much on the other side of the world to you. It's just going 11 a.m. here on Saturday morning, so slightly easier to deal with than a 5 a.m. start or a 1 a.m. start as Julie is dealing with at the moment. So initially, my journey started about 2 years ago when I became Chief Ambassador for my district. And at the time, Pathways hadn't been released yet. We were still very much working out what this crazy thing was and what it was going to look like, what it was going to feel like. Around that time, they'd announced that the first districts that were rolling out, and me being a very, very impatient person and not really liking the idea of sort of not being able to see what was coming up, I decided that I was going to get in on the action and join a club in District 57, which was the first pilot district to roll out Pathways. So my Pathways journey started over a year ago with the first rollouts. And since then, it's just been a case of working my way through and sort of discovering all of the different nooks and crannies about Pathways. I mean, for most of us starting now, there's so much support available. There's so many resources. There's so much information. There's the Pathways discussion forum. There are all of these people around now that can answer all the questions that you might have about the program. How to get started? How do I submit an award? How do I close off a project? What's coming next? All of those important questions. Back in the beginning, the wild frontiers of the early Pathways days, there really wasn't anything. We sort of had to find it out for ourselves. But like Toastmasters, we're very resourceful, we're very enthusiastic, and above all else, we go out and we find our own answers. And that's what we all did. Those of us that sort of started out in the beginning went through and tried and made mistakes and tried again and just kept working out the answers until we worked out how this program worked. And it was fantastic. I'm really, really enjoying the journey. So today I'm going to show you, I guess, explain my individual journey and explain, I guess, how the process works. I'm going to be working off this particular document, which is a summary, an overview that I did up for my district members in terms of how the path to Distinguished Toastmaster worked. So as you can see here, it's broken down very nicely, and we're going to go through each of those in turn to explain what you need to do to become a Pathways, to earn a Distinguished Toastmaster in Pathways, And what has changed from the traditional program, which I think is what a lot of people want to know, is what's different, what needs to be done differently. So the first thing that you need to do is be a member. And congratulations to everyone on this call. You've already ticked that box. You're all members. Beyond that, you can fulfill the requirements to becoming a DTM in any order. Historically, what we found with the traditional program was that a lot of members were holding off on the leadership side of earning their award because they didn't want to become a district officer till they'd been a club officer. They didn't want to work on the longer educational workshops, or they didn't want to do any of the higher projects until they'd finished what came before. With Pathways now, what we've found is that a lot of those requirements have been basically brought down to the same level. So you can now work on building a club at the same time as you're working on your first term as an officer. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. And in fact, it's probably almost encouraged. Let's start at the top then. So with the educational side of things, historically, to earn a DTM, all you had to do was finish the communication track and finish the leadership track. And when you did those two paths, you became a DTM. It happened pretty much automatically. Now it's slightly different. To finish the educational component of the DTM award, you need to finish 2 different learning paths. So that's levels 1 to 5 in 2 different paths. The 2 paths that I selected, the first one was visionary communication, and the second one was presentation mastery. And they're 2 paths that I picked because they were not just interesting, but they also had some of the newer projects in Pathways, and I was really keen to sort of play around with those. But also, visionary communication and presentation mastery, the projects in those paths I could see that they were going to directly help me with where I wanted to go in my career outside of Toastmasters. Now, outside of Toastmasters, I work as a senior financial analyst for my state government back here in Australia, in Queensland. And I was spending a lot of time trying to sell change and trying to communicate changes to our government clients, but also starting to get into this space of doing more training workshops, more stage speaking. And so those 2 paths in particular really appealed because I could see the usefulness of those projects in achieving what I wanted to achieve outside of Toastmasters. And that's probably my first piece of advice for everyone here is when you do go and select a path for the first time, when you are doing that questionnaire, have a think about what your goals are. So not just in Toastmasters, but your goals outside of Toastmasters. Do you want to be a trainer? Do you want to be a better social speaker? Do you want to be the life of the party? And I mean, as an accountant, I can tell you we're never the life of the party. But think about what you want to achieve outside of Toastmasters, what your communication goals are, what your leadership goals are. And then have a look through the catalog of the different paths and their different projects and think about which one of those paths is going to be most useful for you. What I find in the Pathways program compared to the traditional program is that there's so much more learning by doing. Historically, the path to becoming a DTM, a lot of the speech projects were very much just that. It was just prepare a speech, deliver a speech, or some sort of project like that. And while you can learn quite a bit from reading through the manuals, there's really no substitute for going out and giving it a go. And so, for example, in my first path, visionary communication, working my way through the level 1 projects, sort of those key basics. So being able to introduce yourself using the icebreaker. I really enjoyed the evaluation and feedback project. And I liked the way that Toastmasters has made that link now between being able to receive feedback and apply it and then give it to another person. I think that linear sort of structure works really well because feedback is the cornerstone of what we do here in Toastmasters. If we aren't able to apply the feedback that we're getting and to give feedback to other people in an effective way, then the Toastmasters model doesn't work. Clubs don't work, speeches aren't valuable, and we sort of lose the magic that's Toastmasters. So I liked that project a lot. And then as we move into level 2, so level 2 of any path, we start to find that the projects get a little bit more self-reflective. And so I'm just going to pull up actually my dash here to show you what I'm talking about. There we go. All right, so this is visionary communications. As I said, level 1, all the basics. It's the same for every member. Level 2 in visionary communication, again, focuses on very different projects. And at some point it might decide to load, but if not, that's all right, I'll talk you through it. Here we go. In level 2, there's one compulsory project, which is an introduction to Toastmasters mentoring, which is where we get to learn about what mentoring is and how it differs from, say, coaching, which is much more short-term. Mentoring is much more longer-term. It's based around our longer-term goals. But within each of the paths as well, you'll also complete either one or both of the understanding your leadership and understanding your communication style projects. Now, as I said, this is all about self-reflection. So it's about working out what makes you tick. So what's your way of doing things? What are your strengths? What are your areas to work on? But by understanding how you learn and how you operate as a communicator and a leader, then you're in a much more informed position to be able to take control of your own development going forward. So whether that's by finding a mentor that can help you achieve some of those goals, maybe it's selecting different elective projects when we get to levels 3, 4, and 5, or maybe it's just how you undertake some of the projects. So if there's a particular project around taking on a leadership role, it's finding a specific leadership role that's going to help you achieve your goals and fit the best with the style that you have. And so again, Pathway is much more than the traditional program is incremental. So rather than, I guess, coming in, doing the Competent Communicator Manual in pretty much any order, as we used to be able to do, to then sort of doing one of 15 different advanced manuals in any order, in any combination, now it's much more graduated. So we start with the basics, and we move up to reflecting on how we operate and how we learn and what our strengths are. And then we get to move into level 3, which is all about applying those strengths and starting to build some of the skills and get into the really cool stuff that's in the Pathways program. When we get to level 3 and above, as I said, we have electives. Every level has one project that you need to complete, but at the same time, you also have a lot of flexibility to tailor your development with electives. Now, within the visionary communication path, the required project is to develop a communication plan. And I quite enjoyed this one because it was, again, for an accountant to move into that sort of space about thinking about communications and marketing and who am I talking to and how am I talking to them and how can I do that to best effect? How can I communicate all the technical information that I know in a way that's going to be useful to my non-technical audience? Again, very useful and very applied stuff. The elective projects are the same across all paths. It's a very, very long list, but I found them very useful and a lot of them very applied. So what you'll find is some of these projects look very similar to projects from the Competent Communication Manuals and the previous Advanced Communication Manuals, but we've also got a lot of new projects in there as well. And the projects that we have been really sort of enhanced to make them a lot more real world relevant. So rather than just talking about a particular skill like storytelling in its own context, it's all about how do we use storytelling in our work presentations or our social presentations or any other particular presentations. It's all about applying those skills rather than just learning the skills. And I think that's important within Toastmasters and within Pathways is ultimately we're here to learn skills to use outside of Toastmasters. And whenever we're learning that skill, we should always learn it with a view to how we're going to use it. because that's the best way that we're going to make the most of what we're learning, is to think about how can we use it and to try it. So the projects here, again, there's some really new ones that I've quite enjoyed. Make connections through networking is perhaps my favorite project out of all of this list. I'm an introvert. I mean, an accountant is an introvert, shock horror. But for us, and for me in particular, I've always struggled historically with talking to people, to walk into a room full of strangers and introduce myself and start a conversation and just be social. And so this project about making connections through networking really pushed me out of my comfort zone, because the project involves reading up on the materials about effective networking, and then to complete the project, you have to go out to a networking event and actually do it. You have to go out there and talk to strangers and start practicing those skills, and failing miserably in some cases and maybe getting some wins, who knows. But the key with a lot of the projects in Pathways, they tend to follow that: read the material, practice the skill in a real world setting, and then deliver a speech with your reflections and your learnings about the process. And I quite like that, because particularly that applied element of going out and trying the skill, you're getting instantaneous feedback. And if you're going out and you're networking, you can tell whether it's working or not, because you can see it happening right in front of your eyes. And that is a real strength of the Pathways program, is it's all about applying those skills and using them in real world settings as often as we can, because that's going to help us learn a lot, much better than just reading it in a book. So that's what I really love about this program and the educational side of it altogether. So as we move into then level 4, we start to get into some of the more involved projects, some of the more advanced projects. And in this one, the project was communicating change. At the time, I was chief ambassador for my district, and we were starting this process of rolling out this crazy little thing called Pathways. And it was a massive change, as we've all experienced now that it's fully rolled out. When we first started trying to communicate that change and to sell the vision of what Pathways was and what the benefits were and what's in it for our members, was huge. And so that became my Communicate Change project. And I had a perfect laboratory to practice that skill right in front of me with all of the work that I was doing as chief ambassador. So I found the skills and the knowledge and the templates and the resources in this project tremendously useful at learning about change management and how to sell a change to a potentially very skeptical audience. In level 4, the elective projects are quite substantial. They tend to be very applied, and they make use of technology most of the time. So it's managing online meetings, writing a blog, building a social media presence. I'm very impressed with the projects in level 4, because they are mostly very new. And these are projects and these are skills that we haven't had the opportunity to learn before in Toastmasters in a structured way. And to pick up some of these projects and to have a look through them, it's just, this is Toastmasters for the 21st century. And you can immediately see how learning how to use social media better can be used in your day-to-day life, in your work life, in your communities, friends, organizing a Christmas party, however you want to use it. There are so many useful skills here that make the most of the technology that we have available to us in this day and age. And again, it's all about linking it back to how we're going to use it in the real world. And then we come to level 5. Now, level 5 is the level where we are theoretically at the top of our game. We're sort of at the end point of our path, and we're really starting to get a sense for what we're doing and what we're bringing all together to deliver. So in visionary communication, the level 5 project is to develop your vision. And for me, that was all about sitting down and thinking about where I wanted to go with my life. and in particular my career. So I developed a vision around my future career, what I wanted it to look like in 5, 10, 20 years time, and then start to think about how I was going to fill those gaps. And using the resources in the project materials and just starting to fill those gaps was really useful for me. It was something that was very beneficial for me personally, but I hope also for my future career, being able to think about where I want to go and where I want to use my Toastmasters skills to take me to where I want to go. Every level 5 path finishes with a project called Reflect on Your Path. And this is an important one. At the end of all of the projects, when you've finished 5 levels, when you've learned all there is to learn, and you've got a real sense of this progress that you've made from when you first did the icebreaker in level 1 to where you've just finished your big level 5 projects. The Reflect on Your Path project is all about looking back. So looking back at what you've learned over those 14, 15 speeches, all of those activities outside of the club, everything that you've learned, looking back on that and communicating that to your fellow members. And then perhaps most importantly, so when we're done looking back, starting to look forward in terms of what's next. And this, again, very important for us as Toastmasters, is to always have goals that we're working towards. So now that we've finished one goal in terms of finishing a full path, it's like, okay, what's next? Is it another path? Is it a district leadership role? Is it starting a club, coaching a club? What's next? What are we going to do with this path, these skills that we've just learned? Let's go out there and do something, because Toastmasters are doers. We don't just learn, but we actually go out there and we apply our skills and we make magic happen. And that is, in a nutshell, what a path looks like. Every path follows the same structure. The projects may be different, but every path follows that structure. And so that's, again, a good reference point for everyone. So that gets us through sort of parts A and B of education, finishing one path and then finishing another. The third part of education is to complete the Distinguished Toastmaster project. Now, previously in the traditional program, we had the High Performance Leadership project, and that was almost the capstone project for the Toastmasters program. What headquarters have done is they've moved the High Performance Leadership project, the HPL, into level 5. So it's now a level 5 path, a level 5 project for 3 of the paths, and it's also an elective for all of the others. So if you still want to do a HPL, you can. If you're not really interested in doing a HPL, you can pick a path that doesn't have it as a compulsory project, and you can save yourself all that time if that's where you want to go. Depends on your goals. The Distinguished Toastmaster project, though, is slightly different to the HPL. It's got a different focus. Now, this one is all about using the skills that you've acquired in Path 1 and Path 2. So bringing those skills together and designing a project that allows you to show them off, basically, to bring those skills and to use them to benefit an organization. So it can be Toastmasters, it can be another organization entirely. But the idea is, now that we've learned these two paths and we've got all the skills together, let's go and bring it together and do something with them. And again, a great benefit of Toastmasters is it's all about learning skills and then using them. So for the Distinguished Toastmaster project, for this particular project, at least anyways, was for me the rollout. So in that last 6 months prior to the launch of Pathways in our district, organizing a team of 30 Pathways guides and just getting visits done, getting all the information out, preparing resources, following up with clubs and members, and working that team like an absolute demon. But that was my Distinguished Toastmaster project. It allowed me to bring together the skills that I'd learned around visionary communication and selling a change, and also the skills that I'd learned in presentation mastery around training and communication. So by using those two skill sets, we were able to sell that change and to have a successful rollout in our district. But for other people, I've seen other distinguished Toastmasters in Pathways create events. They've gone out and they've done work with community organizations. So there is really no limit to what you can do with this project. It's all about applying the skills that you've learned across to complete paths. Now that's the education side of things. I'm going to move down now and start talking about the other components of a DTM in Pathways. Now, a lot of these are going to be very familiar to you. They're very similar to the traditional program. There are a few slight tweaks on some of them. So moving down to our yellow box on club leadership. Previously, it was a minimum of 6 months, and that was as part of our Advanced Leader Bronze Awards. We'd serve as a club officer for a minimum of 6 months, and that would sort of fulfill our club leadership requirement under the traditional program DTM. Now it's 12 months. For some clubs which have full 12-month terms, that just means serving one term as a VPM or a secretary or a treasurer. For clubs which may have 6 monthly terms, so they meet weekly and they change over their executives every 6 months, it may be a case of serving 2 terms. And these 2 terms can be done in any order at any time. So you might do 1 term as a secretary and then followed up by another 6 months of serving as a VP education. Or you might do them a year apart. Or if you're in multiple clubs, you could possibly do, secretary in one club and treasurer in another club at the same time. And that would also count. So it's a combined 12 months of club leadership service. That's the club leadership component. The district leadership component hasn't changed. Previously, it was buried in the Advanced Leader Silver Award requirements. Now it's sort of been pulled out and sits by itself. And that's what a lot of these additional requirements have done now. So rather than having that being a club sponsor or being a district officer as part of the learning path, headquarters has pulled all of these requirements out and put them as separate requirements by themselves. Now, the practical impact of this is that members can work on their paths and finish 1 to 5 and do as many 1 to 5s as they want without getting stuck by not being able to be a club leader or not being able to be a district officer or not being able to sponsor a club. So you can work your way through, paths 1 to 5, as many paths as you want, as much as you like, to your heart's content. And for those members that aren't interested in leadership at this point in time, that's a great option for them because they're still getting the benefit of the program, but they're not getting stalled by running into a roadblock that they don't really want to overcome at this point in time. However, what it also means is that you're not limited in being able to start these till you get to a point in time. So historically, it used to be you'd serve as a club officer first, then a district officer, and you wouldn't look at sponsoring or mentoring a club or coaching a club until you were working on your Advanced Leader Silver. Now you can start coaching or sponsoring or mentoring a club or being a speechcraft coordinator whenever you like. There's no restriction on when you get started, which hopefully will mean that we'll see more volunteers, more people stepping up to practice those skills and develop those skills because they feel like they can get started sooner rather than having to wait until they've crossed a mythical line to say, well, before then I wasn't ready, but now I've earned these 3 letters and suddenly I'm ready. It's all about, again, it's about breaking down those barriers and letting members learn skills and have experiences that are going to develop them as soon as they feel that they're ready for them. So we have district leadership, and that's the same as it was previously. Now we come down to club extension and club, and these are my 2 takes on it. Historically, what we've seen was in the Advanced Communicator Gold Award requirements as part of the old communication track, you used to have to fulfill, coordinate a success communication or a success leadership workshop. Now, these were the extended training workshops that headquarters had put together. Some of them ran anywhere from an hour to 4.5 hours if you were delivering a speaker to trainer workshop. Now, within those modules were speechcraft and youth leadership. So what we're seeing now is that requirement has been sort of pulled out again, and that now sits with being a club sponsor. The rest of the success communication, success leadership workshops, as well as the Better Speaker, Successful Club, and Leadership Excellence series, the educationals that we've historically given in clubs, they're still around, but they don't count for award credit anymore. So clubs are still encouraged to run regular educational sessions. And again, many of my clubs run a 10 to 15 minute educational every month, at least once a month. And that's important, and clubs should still keep doing that, because it's an important part in helping to build our members' skills and knowledge, particularly about the practical elements of being a Toastmaster. So it's, as a new member coming into the club, it can often take a lot of time for us to learn how to evaluate, how to speak impromptu, how to prepare a speech, how to craft an introduction. And educational sessions fill that gap by giving those members skills sooner. So rather than waiting for them to pick it up by osmosis, or just if I just spend enough time around these Toastmasters, I'll eventually work out how to do everything that they're doing just magically. Run those educational sessions, because that's how you build your members' skills faster and help your new members in particular be a part of the club. Because once they feel like they know what they're doing, then they can contribute, and they're much more likely to stay in your club because they know what's going on and they know how to participate as well. So what headquarters has done, so as I said, the advanced communicator gold requirements, we had youth leadership and speechcraft. On the advanced leader silver side of the equation, in the leadership track, we had serve as a club sponsor, mentor, or coach. And that was one requirement over that side. What headquarters has done is tweaked them slightly, and they've tweaked them in these two particular ways. So previously, it was entirely possible that a member could serve as a speechcraft coordinator and serve as a club sponsor, and that would be enough to get them through to a DTM. Now that's not possible. What headquarters has done is they've split it up into two. The club sponsor, speechcraft coordinator, and youth leadership coordinator requirements are all grouped together. And this is all about extending the organization. So bringing new people into Toastmasters by either starting a club or running a speechcraft course or running a youth leadership course. So it's all about spreading the organization. So helping build the clubs or build the membership, or just getting the word out about Toastmasters. And so that's why those three requirements sit together. And then on the other side, we have club support. And this is all about supporting clubs that already exist. And that requirement is to be either a club mentor or a club coach. And because both of those clubs still exist, a club mentor is spending 6 to 12 months working with a club that's just started. A club coach is working with a club that has 12 or less members to help build them back up to strength again. And as you can imagine, there's two very different skill sets involved there. And the club extension skill sets are all about sales and marketing and business development. On the club and coach and mentor side, it's all about coaching and mentoring and guiding existing members. And so displaying some of that leadership and those motivational skills. Two very different skill sets. And the reason they've been separated as they have is because when you look at the total requirements to become a distinguished Toastmaster, so between working on your two paths, to serving as a club leader, serving as a district leader, to helping build the organization and then supporting the existing organization, across all of those requirements, a member that finishes those, that completes all of those requirements, is going to have a very broad experience across not just the organization, but also across communication leadership skills as well. And that's the thinking behind the new requirements for the Pathways DTM. It's not about sort of picking the path of least resistance and finding the quickest way through to becoming a DTM. It's all about getting a well-grounded, a broad experience in Toastmasters and communication and leadership so that when someone does earn that award and they do become a DTM under the Pathways program, you know instinctively that this person has served as a club leader. They've worked their way through to, proficiency in 2 learning paths. They've used those skills to do something for an organization. They've served as a strategic leader in the district. They've done work around expanding our organization, and they've gone out and they've supported our clubs that already exist. Like, anyone who reaches that award has done a lot. They've had a lot of experiences, they've met a lot of people, they've practiced and developed so many different skills just to get there. That's what makes being a DTM special. It's not about the award, it's not about the letters after your name. It's about what you've done and what you've learned and what you've contributed to get to that point. So that's what it's all about in terms of the Pathways DTM. Now, once you've done all of these requirements, and currently we've got about a dozen members that are now Pathways DTMs around the world, and I know at least 10 of them. Once you've finished those requirements, it's all about, okay, how do I submit the award? At the moment, World Headquarters is still struggling a little bit with this because they haven't updated Club Central to be able to automatically recognize when members have finished the Pathways components of the new DTM. So what we have now, and I'll jump out quickly and pull up the new Pathways application form. No, it's not that. It is, there we go. So this is the new Distinguished Toastmaster Award application for Pathways. It has all of the sort of typical stuff, but then it's also got the details around which path you finished, when you finished it, when you did the DTM project, when you served as a club officer, when you served as a district officer, and so on and so forth. Now, Headquarters is able to check all of this information with their records in their systems, but this is all about submitting the application and starting that process with Headquarters. Now, at the moment, it's an email application rather than a digital application. Sorry, Headquarters isn't quite that far advanced yet, but this is also an excellent form to track your progress. At the moment, we don't have a good enough tracking system for the member to track, well, okay, well, I've finished this path and I've done that requirement and I've ticked this off to work towards a DTM. We don't have one of those yet. Headquarters is working on it, but it's not there yet. In the meantime, this is an excellent tool to track your progress towards the DTM. As you gradually fulfill each requirement, you can fill in the details, and then once everything's filled out, you just send it in, and then congratulations, you'll be a Distinguished Toastmaster as well. So that is pretty much it in terms of the path to being a Distinguished Toastmaster. As I said, it's very rewarding by working your way through the program and by getting involved in all of those different experiences, not just within the club, but outside of the club as well. You learn so much. I found that the value in becoming a DTM, not just for the first time or the second or however many times, it's not about the letters after your name. It's not about the award. I mean, the plaque is nice, but it's not about that. It's about the experience, the journey, the people that you meet, the things that you get to do, the skills that you learn, and the contribution that you get to make to not just your life, but to other people's lives and to the organization as well. So being a Distinguished Toastmaster is distinguished for a reason. And that's why I've enjoyed this journey. It's why I'm very much looking forward to working on my second Pathways DTM. And again, the second one is going to be a completely different experience to the first. There'll be new paths, there'll be new clubs to be an officer in, there'll be new district officer roles, and there'll be new clubs to start and to help out. And that's what it's just that experience, those people, all of those things to learn and to enjoy. Now, in terms of, and I'll quickly circle back to previous credit and how you can apply that to the Pathways DTM. Now, what you'll notice here is that apart from the education box, everything else is the same, more or less the same as what we had in the traditional program. And so headquarters has stated, or their policy is that if you have previously served as a club officer, if you've previously served as a district officer, if you've previously sponsored a club or been a speechcraft coordinator or youth leadership coordinator, if you've previously mentored or coached a club and you haven't already submitted that as part of a traditional program award, you can put that credit and that experience towards a Pathways DTM. So for those of you that have been quite active in the organization already, you're probably more than halfway there to becoming a Pathways DTM. The key thing is that you will need to finish those 2 paths and the DTM project. That's what's really the main difference between the traditional and the Pathways DTMs, is the new paths, the new projects, and that new learning experience. So that is, I guess, about it. That's very much my story. That's where I've come from where I first started in Pathways to where we are now. And at the time, I certainly wasn't expecting to be the first in the world, but it happened. But now, when you're the first of anything, the key thing there is that there's always more coming behind. And so, as I said, we have over a dozen distinguished Toastmasters in Pathways now, and we've got more coming all the time. There are members all over the world that are really embracing the new program, that are getting stuck into it, are really enjoying what they find. They're learning the skills, they're applying them, they're having a really good time, and they're working towards that goal. And yes, it's a goal, it's not the be all and end all, but it is a goal that people can work towards. It's a milestone, it's a wonderful achievement in and of itself. And for me at least, it's just the beginning. When you earn your Distinguished Toastmaster Award, there's still a huge world of opportunities out there within the Toastmasters universe. There's the professional speaking track, and people may want to work on becoming accredited speakers. There's traveling around, visiting other clubs, other districts, meeting Toastmasters from all over the world. There's attending international conventions. There's international level leadership positions. There are so many different ways to get involved. There are so many different things to learn and to enjoy and to explore, that Toastmasters really is that organization where you'll never run out of things to learn. All you have to do is keep an eye out for those opportunities and learn and use them. Use those opportunities to learn, because they are out there, and there's always out there. And there are always people around the world, within your own district, within your own club, within Toastmasters International, who are more than happy to help you along the journey and to share their stories as well. So with that, thank you so much for being a part of this little session today, and I'm going to throw right back to Fabiola. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mark. A wealth of information, and as our team is, stay informed. So I hope members really get to get this information to help them also to continue. I have 3 questions, and then I will give the floor to anyone else that has a question. My first question is also that came up in the session before. When you mentioned going through your path, I assume in the club you did get people that said, I'm not on Pathways. How can I evaluate a pathway project? That is the first question. The second question is, or comment is, you also worked the mentorship path. If you can just give us something on that. And an interesting part that you said, persons that at this moment have maybe a coach or mentor requirement already fulfilled, they are, let's say, on the way to being a DTM, and they can apply for the traditional or the pathways. So you don't necessarily need to finish the old one to apply that. So those 3 questions I have.
Okay, excellent. So question 1, When I first started Pathways, I joined a club in District 57 in California in the United States. So I joined remotely via Zoom. They had members that were dialing in from all over the world. And through being a member of that club, I gained access to Basecamp and to Pathways. Now, that was a small club. They only had about sort of 11 to 12 members. They met weekly. And so I was able to deliver a speech there almost once every fortnight. And again, it was a great opportunity to learn and to find out more about the program. And for the club, on the flip side, they really needed some mentoring and some support to help rebuild. And so I was sort of happy to, trade my knowledge and experience and advice to help rebuild that club in exchange, for having this opportunity to learn about Pathways before it reached my district 6 months down the track. So that I think was a win-win for everyone. Now, the second part on the mentor program. So when a member finishes level 2, so in level 2, we have that compulsory introduction to Toastmasters mentoring project. Now, every member has to do that particular project, and that's really much focused around how to be a good protege, so how to be mentored by someone else. Beyond that, so when you finish level 2, members have access to the optional Pathways Mentor program. And this is 3 projects, which is for members wanting to learn how to be mentors and how to develop mentoring skills, not just in Toastmasters, but also outside of Toastmasters as well. So I've found the 3 projects are Introduction to Mentoring. And that first project is a self-reflective project on what skills, what experience and expertise you can bring to a mentoring relationship and what your boundaries and your parameters are for being a mentor. So, when's a good time to communicate with you, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that sort of stuff that needs to be thought about before we match you up with someone. The second project is mentoring, and that's your first practical experience of mentoring another member through one project. So that could be an icebreaker project, or if the mentor is a very experienced Toastmaster, it could be one of the higher projects. So it could be a level 4 or level 5 project. No restrictions, just mentor a member through another project. And then the third part of the program, which is, I love it so much. The Advanced Mentoring Project, the requirement is to mentor somebody else, can be a Toastmaster, can be someone who's not a Toastmaster, for a period of 6 months. So over 6 months, sitting down with a member, helping them work out their goals, develop an action plan, keeping in touch regularly, and then slowly over that time, helping them to become a better person. So to achieve their goals, whatever those goals may be. And I really enjoyed that process because, again, you get 6 months to work with someone and to really make a positive difference to their life. And I've used those skills. My initial advanced mentoring assignment was with a Toastmaster in another part of my country. So it was like an hour's flight away, and we had a remote mentoring relationship, and that worked really, really well. But I've taken those skills since then, and I've been using those with work colleagues. So as a senior analyst, working with some of the more junior analysts and applying those same skills to their career path, and just really making the most of that experience of being able to work with someone and to help them achieve their goals in life. It's really, really rewarding. So that was question 2. And now question 3. What was question 3? It was about previous credit.
About the credits for DTM, sponsoring, mentoring that you have already. Instead of waiting to start with Pathways, you can apply it also.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can start Pathways now. You can work the traditional program and the Pathways program side by side until the end of June 2020, at which point everyone's going to be working on Pathways. But there's nothing stopping people from doing both now. And in fact, I probably encourage every member to, at the very least, jump into Pathways and do their icebreaker. And the reason I say that is because you're going to have new members coming into your club all the time. And if you can't explain your own program and how to get started to a new member, then they're not going to stay. So as much as possible, jump in there, at least do the basics so that you can help new members who are starting out, because they're going to need assistance too to work out how to start the program, what Toastmasters is all about. And yeah, to me, that's about the club as much as it is about the members. So now, for the sake of your club, definitely jump into Pathways and start playing around. You don't have to, get a DTM in the next 12 months or 2 years. That's okay. You can take your time, but at least get in there and play around with the basics, because that's going to help your club and your members a lot.
That's great. Reading a comment in the chat from Stephen Francis. Toastmasters Mark, this is the first talk I have heard on Pathways that has made me seriously consider pursuing Pathways. Thank you very much for making it so plain. And the PDF file you used is A1. Congratulations on becoming the first DTM. Well deserved, indeed.
Thank you, Stephen.
Any other questions? We have about 5 more minutes, so.
And I would like to know if the Pathway program is disponible in French.
Mm-hmm.
It is. So the Pathways program is currently in 9 languages.
French.
Yes, French is one of those languages.
Okay, thank you.
And we have a comment also from Roy. Yes, Roy?
Yeah, I am very impressed. I am glad I joined this session, because as a region advisor, I hear a lot about the discontent with people in Pathways. And Mark, you made it look so easy. And I agree with Stephen. It is one of the best talks I ever heard about Pathways. And when Fabiola sends out this recording, I will share it with the rest of the districts in Region 8 so that the members can hear from their peer how it has helped him. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you, Roy.
Coming back to Norbert's question about French, what I've experienced is that because the international website is English, you don't get people to even start doing the assessment. But you can change if you are on Google. You can change your browser, change your website for the French, so you can get into Pathways to do your assessment. Once you do your assessment, you can get all your materials in French. And also, we did have a special session for District D 2 weeks ago. And in January or so, we will try to put some more. And I invite you to log in on Sunday, because we have our very own Julie. She is also a DTM in Pathways, just turned the DTM in Pathways, and she is 85. I think
85.
So be there on Sunday to listen to her, to the stories that she has, how she has done it, and now she's doing it also in French. Actually, she has been a Pathway guide for a couple of French-speaking clubs, so you will get a lot out of that also.
Thank you very much. I will try to connect on Sunday. And yes, thank you very much, Mark. It was very nice.
Thank you, Norbert.
Any other question? 2 more minutes. Julie, you wanted to say something? Yes, go ahead.
I have heard some noise that Mark has done a lot of projects, not only 2 paths. So how many paths you have done, and which is your preferred path?
Julie, you caught me. All right, so I have finished all 10 paths. So since I first started working on Pathways April last year, yes, I've worked my way through and finished all 10 paths. Really enjoyed the experience. Every path that I've worked on has been different. I would say my favorite one, I think it's still visionary communication. Visionary communication, first and favorite, always. And a large part of that, I think, is from taking the time to sit down and to work out which of the paths is going to be the most suitable for what you want. So I think always, before you pick a path, sit down, read through the details, find out what's involved, because the better a fit that it is for your needs and for your goals, the more you're going to enjoy it.
Thank you.
No worries. Now I'm waiting for the next one to come out.
Well,
There is a humor path coming out at some point.
This is Leslie Mercado from Puerto Rico, and I also have a question.
Go ahead.
I want to know if for every path I have to make the icebreaker.
Short answer, yes.
Even
Longer
if you are in the second pathway?
Yes. So every time, so this is something that headquarters is looking at the moment with their summit team, which is reviewing all the feedback on pathways. But at present, whenever you start a new path, you do level 1 again. That being said, I think I don't think it's a bad thing to go back and to review some of those core skills, particularly because, I mean, with the icebreaker, we're always going to be introducing ourselves to strangers all the time, whether it's in our club, whether it's on the street, whether it's in the work setting. There's always new people to introduce ourselves to. So practicing that skill on a semi-regular basis is okay. Same with the evaluation and feedback. So these core skills, to me, it's not a bad thing to revisit from time to time.
Thank you.
No worries, but watch this space.
One more question, and then we will have to close this part.
I would like to add that Mark has contributed a lot freely by making a pathway companion PDF, which everyone should have and could have.
Yes, that's true. Okay, with this, I would like to thank Mark for sharing with us. This has been indeed a very informative session for all that are on at this moment. And I think we're going to use the recording a lot. Thank you so much. There has been some question about the PDF that you have shared. If you would like to send it to me so I can share it with everyone. And as I said, I invite everyone for the Sunday session, well, especially the French speaking, because the complete session will be in French. So you will be able to follow it, make time to do that. For those that are in Division D, that will be 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the evening. Before that, we will have our region advisor, Roy, addressing you in a session. So after the session with Roy, we will have the session with Julie? Sorry, Sunday. Yes, with Julie. So you in French, so you have the opportunity to do that. Thanks again.
Right.
And this is our time to take a break before the next session. The next session is going to be very short. It is a panel discussion with our district leaders, but it will be a very short one since I did have a couple of cancellations, but so far so good. And I will stop the recording now so we can take the break.